Welcome to the show. I think um, this
It'll
is
it'll
the World War One. This is the World War One stream. I believe we are in May. Correct.
yes, we are in May, and
All
there's
right.
some really big events that happen in May. Although a lot of this is not really understandable, that's going to have a lot to do with world politics. All right, in the near future and in the far future, you're going to see a lot of things seem to happen all at once. All right, and then there's other things that are happening that don't seem to be much, but will have long-lasting effects.
Well, no, and once again, this is May 1915. We are continuing on through the spring. All right. May Day here. The Austria-German spring offensive begins. Do they make any headway?
This is an actual massive offensive as it builds. It is not intended initially to be. It's initially just intended to be a smaller offensive, but you'll see as it builds. Further down, the Gorlice-Tano battle ends and so forth. Basically, you're going to see this battle basically build. All right. Now let's talk about the Eastern Front for a moment. This is the Eastern Front. Right. You will notice where the lines have more or less overly stabilized. By the end of this offensive, this is going to be the line.
Oh, so the Germans are going to lose a shit ton of ground.
This is the Russians.
Oh, the Russians. Okay. But there is a bulge at the beginning of the battle. Now, where do they initially make their moves?
The initial moves are down here. And it's just the main purpose of this move is to try and relieve pressure, all right, because further down along the Austrian border with Russia, the Russians are kicking the Austro-Hungarians' ass. Okay, if you really want to understand just how devastating and how bloody this combat is, the entire force of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, right, that began at the battle and began the battles in 1914, half of them now are casualties.
And these aren't chemical attacks or anything. No. This is a basic assault. They are going up and over the trench and doing a head-on assault.
This is a winter. Just getting at the end of winter. Okay, you got to remember this is Russia. This is the deep north. The trenches here are not the kind of trench lines that you see in the Western Front. And to be honest, the British are going to encounter something that the Germans have done. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to some of the other stuff. But the Russians, while they have barely any real trenches, they have like ditches. is the way the Germans describe it. They don't have a true trench line. So when they bring in the heavy artillery, all right, they basically pulverize the Russians and just start moving forward.
Was it the fact that the ground had permafrost and it was too hard to actually dig into?
It's a combination of all three things. It's a combination of that. It's a combination of bad leadership, and it's a combination of the lack of logistics that the Russians have. You got to remember, Russia. You can see these lines. See how these lines are going to come clear out over here, and you still haven't seen the end of this because this still goes down all the way to the Ottoman Turks. Okay. The Russian front. The Russians are defending on a front line that is literally, thousands of miles long. Now, they have the troops theoretically to deal with that, but they just don't have the equipment to handle it. And they don't have the logistics chain in which to feed people. Not the kind of forces that they need. You got to remember, they're able to plus up these forces, but where are they taking them from? They're taking them from the peasantry. What do the peasantry do? Grow food, right?
Well, no, and with such a long line to defend, you have points of entry where they can penetrate and do a lot of damage before you can even respond, right?
That's correct. And this battle and the battle of Tannenberg, rather, and the battle of the Martian Lakes, right, which was basically the second battle of the Martian Lakes, which was up in here, this area here. The Russians have already lost 2 armies. They've already lost 200,000 men. All right. And when I mean lost, I mean captured and killed, captured, and casualties. 200,000. Just basically 2 armies of the Russia have been destroyed. 2 Russian armies have already been destroyed.
So as the Russians start to fall back, how many troops are they actually losing here?
Hundreds of thousands. They're losing troops in hundreds of thousands. And throughout this month, basically what you have, where the lines finally stabilize along this line here, you have a number of serious things. These reverses are huge. They really convince the Russian people that they're losing the war. Troops are poorly fed. Many of them are just they don't even have guns in some cases, right? They're being told to line up, and when the guy in front of you falls, pick up his rifle. They don't have the supplies. They do not have the equipment to truly equip this military. And furthermore, the leadership is just horrible. And the result of this, you will see, the Tsar is going to replace and take direct control of the military.
Yeah, no, and as we progress through this timeline, that is something I do want to address, and maybe not even today, but the Tsar should have never took direct command. If he didn't, in my humble opinion, I do not believe he would have been overthrown. That's my opinion and quite a few other historians.
But was there any choice? Did the Tsar have any other choice?
He could have trusted his generals. So yeah, I would say he did have a choice.
Well, which generals are you going to trust? The ones that have led to these major disasters?
You're telling me they have nobody else underneath them?
I'm telling you, you got to remember who are these generals? This is something that you got to remember. These generals were basically the nobility. Understand this. The Tsar and so forth, they're not mired in a modern. They got modern weapons to a point, right? But their society is it basically still relying upon serfs, right? They're still a hardcore aristocracy. So who was in place? Who were they given these positions to? These positions were being given to people that were part of the aristocracy. Remember, the aristocracy is very, very powerful here. It means something when they say somebody's a Grand Duke. It means something when they say somebody is a baron, okay? Because they're locked into that mentality in Russia. That is a sequence of things in Russia that's going on. So the people who are being given these titles, all right, now they're being forced to try and back them up with modern weaponry. And quite frankly, most of them aren't capable of doing it, but the society has put them in this place. It isn't a meritocracy, okay? It's an aristocracy. Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I'm following along. So as the line gets pushed back and the Germans advance, they have to feel good about the Eastern Front, but when it comes to the Western, it's a stalemate.
It is, but that's always what Falkenhayn had always planned. Falkenhayn had always determined that they were going to, at this point in time, they were going to stabilize the West and just go on the defensive. And we're going to get to some of those battles, and we're going to talk about them a little bit later, because the British, there's a major offensive that happens. The Battle of Troy. I'm assuming the second Battle of Troy, however you say this word, right?
Well, no, I was looking at the other events on May Day. So the United States has its first ship attacked by a German U-boat.
First ship attacked without warning.
Yeah,
Okay,
that is true.
That's it. But it's damaged, but it reaches port. Okay, you see that the going forward. All right. Now the Battle of Dilham is a small battle. It's fought against the Ottoman Turks by the Russians. It's for the most part it's a small battle. However, you know the Armenians. There's a bunch of Armenian defectors. There's also a bunch of Kurdish defectors against the Ottomans, and the Ottomans lose this battle. They lose. Dilham is here. Let me pull this up. Where this battle is being fought, okay, is approximately in this area right around here. All right, and the Russians are pushing down through here, and this area here is Armenia, basically the Armenians, and they basically betray the Turks. The Turks, as a result, basically respond in kind of saying we need to exterminate them all, and consequently, they don't trust the Kurds either. Because of all the Kurds, half the Ottoman forces at the beginning of that battle were Kurds. The Kurds absolutely fled the battlefield in mass. So they lost half of their troops because they just said, you know what, we're not going to fight for you because you're Ottoman Turks. For some reason, this kind of embittered people. Now, at the same time this is going on, got to remember, you have this shit going on right here. You have the Gallipoli campaign right there. I don't know if I can zoom in or not. Doesn't let me zoom in. That's okay. But right here is where Gallipoli is happening, and you're going to see what the results of this is going to be. All right, but Gallipoli is going on. People are stuck on the stupid peninsula, dying. All right, Indians, Australians, New Zealanders are stuck on that island, not able to go forward, not able to go back. They're not able to go back because the British are refusing to bring them back at this point, and they're just keeping them there, trying to force this. And they're at the same time, they're still trying to force the Dardanelles. That every now and then, the British will try to force a ship through this strait.
Well, honestly though, that's not necessarily a bad maneuver. You have a ground campaign, where you have the beachhead. They did get a beachhead. And then you try and shove your navy up through the strait. Why not? Right?
Well, because why not? Because you can't get rid of the mines. You need to be able to take that peninsula in order to be able to get rid of the mines to get your ships up in there.
Why can't you send dinghies out and explode the mines on purpose?
Because you'll get your people shot. And normally a dinghy, let's be honest, a dinghy is just a flat, very, very surface boat. Okay. A warship sinks down there. How are you going to get these mines? I mean, it's going to have to go into 10 foot of water. A dinghy, you're just going to float right over the mines and not even set it off.
Oh, that is a good point. I didn't think about that. The displacement level is quite a bit different.
Exactly. And in fact, that's how mines are designed. People don't realize this. Everyone has these pictures of these floating mines, all right, or the mines that are tethered to the bottom of the ocean, right? That they've seen in movies with subs and stuff, right? Thinking that those mines were there for subs. No, those mines are not there for subs. They're there for ships. Because where you want to explode the mine, where you want the mine to go off, is at or below, really below the water line. And the reason you want to detonate it below the water line next to the ship is all that pressure, all right, as it starts to expand the water, hits that steel. And what's on the other side of that steel? Air. Okay, so all of a sudden that steel just buckles in. That's what makes mines so devastating to ships, especially if they hit somewhere near the keel, because of the keel, right? The spine of the ship on the bottom of the ship is destroyed. The ship is done. The ship is the ship is destroyed, it will sink. There won't be a way to stop it. It will basically come apart.
Well, yeah. So as the British are trying to move up into the strait, why isn't Churchill recognizing the fact that this is an unattainable position?
Well,
is it hubris?
he's like everyone else trying to win the war. All right. The Germans are not coming out to play tag, all right, in the North Sea like everybody expected them to. They're not able to get anywhere on land, and you'll see this in a few minutes. So they're trying to say, okay, if we can just push it just a little bit more, if we can just seize this, all right. Basically, what everyone's trying to do is they're trying to win the war, looking for that knockout haymaker punch that allows them to get mobile again, get their forces mobile to end the battles. They're looking for that quick victory.
Yeah, but they're not going to get it.
But that's hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, exactly. That remains to be seen. As we continue on,
there is one more thing that I do want to say about this. You asked why does Churchill do this, and there's one more thing I wanted to mention. Quite frankly, you also got to remember the times, the mentality of that time frame of these group of people. They did not have a very high opinion about the fighting capability of the Turks. Okay, they think of the Turks as next to useless, that you can easily swat them out of the way. They don't have a world army like the Germans do. All right, they're not the big tough opponents that the Germans are. All right, they're poorly led. This is the mentality, and you can take it from a type of racist type of an ideal, right? That they have, but they really didn't think much of Turks. They didn't really think that they could even stand this kind of a battle that they have. Now, in other areas, the Turks are basically, they're being poorly led, and so people like Churchill are looking at this going, this should be a cakewalk for us. These guys are poorly led. We scare them with our massive force, and then they're going to go run and hide. All right. I mean, look what we did in the Sinai. Look what we did at the Suez Canal. It should be an easy victory just like that. It's part of the racist mentality that existed at the time. And I shouldn't say racist. Bigoted mentality, I guess, is a better way of saying it. Okay? There's this mentality, and this isn't just Churchill now. This is everybody. And even and you'll see this, Churchill gets replaced soon. All right. When Churchill's replaced, everyone's blaming him not just for Gallipoli, but for doing Gallipoli or anything. They're basically saying you couldn't beat the Turks. You're useless. How come you couldn't have beat the Turks? Well, because the Turks want to win. When you're in a battle, the other guy's trying to win too.
Well, no, and the thing is too, it was kind of hubris at that point then, right?
It adds to it. It wasn't just hubris, but it does add to it, yes. I mean, from a tactical position, it makes sense to try and do this. It was.
As we move forward into the 4th of May, Italy denounces the Triple Alliance.
Yes.
Why does Italy denounce the Triple Alliance?
The Triple Alliance is the Ottoman Turks, Austria-Hungary, and Germany.
Yeah, but why do they throw their hat in with France and Great Britain?
They want territorial gains. All right, that from Austria-Hungary. They want certain territories that they felt that these are Italian-speaking people that are living in Austro-Hungarian territory, and they want to take it. They are looking at it from a greed standpoint. They're also looking at it from a nationalistic standpoint. All the Italian people, all the Italian-speaking people should be under Italy. That's the mentality.
So it's not really, in my opinion, when it comes to Mussolini, and the Second World War, he wanted to recreate the Roman Empire. This isn't that level of hubris from the Italians.
Okay, there's an element of that. You can't say that element doesn't exist, right? But you got to remember, Italy has just coalesced into Italy. Italy didn't exist before. Just like Germany is a brand new entity, the nation state of Germany is fairly new. It only basically got created in 1868 under Bismarck. Okay, Italy has coalesced into a country, all right, in 1890. I think it's 1898 is when Italy is once again more or less united, what we consider Italy as the Italian peninsula. All right, so there is a bit of that. It's a part of this. It's also a part of, look, the world's at war. The Austro-Hungarians are fighting. They have territory that we've always claimed should have been ours. All right, here's our chance to sit up there and say, hey, give it back to us. Make a deal with us, and we won't go to war with you. And of course, the Austro-Hungarians are like, we've got enough problems. We'll deal with you later, right? So they rebuff the Italians, and of course, the Italians are like looking at it. Okay, how can we get this prize? Because Austria-Hungary, all right, is getting its ass handed to it to a large extent. It is still fighting. It didn't crush the Serbians yet. All right, it's on its border with Russia. Unless the Germans are there, they're losing. Okay, so they're not making any headway unless the Germans are in charge. So they're looking really weak, and this looks like a time to revolt against them. It's also an idea amongst many of the Italians to say, hey, we can also snatch up some lands from the Ottoman Turks. All right. Now, they didn't have any border with them directly, but since the Ottoman, got to remember, the Ottoman Turks are there, and there's personal animosity still. All right. I mean, because the Ottoman Turks are Muslims. All right. The fighting from the old Holy Roman emperors and everything else, all that mentality still exists. All these people still have that quote unquote ancient mentality or ancestral memory, all right, of those battles. So getting involved with another Holy Crusade is also a draw to many of the Italians. But Italy isn't prepared for war. And many of its politicians understand that they are not the industrial state that Germany is. They are not the industrial might that the British are, or even the French. So they're trying to walk a thin line, okay, and it's going to fail.
Okay, also on the 4th, the Battle of Ypres ends.
Or Ypres, or Ypres.
Yeah, however you want to pronounce it this week.
Where the lines have stabilized now. The chemicals have all been, basically all the chemical coloring, chemical weapons have all been put away, mainly because they've used them all, right? But now, one of the things that has been happening during this time frame, the Germans are withdrawing. Okay, Falkenhayn has seen what's been happening, seen how these battles take place, and he has now decided, okay, I'm going to go completely on the defensive in the West, and so I'm going to withdraw to true defensive positions. I can't do it with them noticing, right? But as they prepare for their battles, the Germans are slowly withdrawing their men. All right, they've done two things. They built new defensive lines deeper in the rear. Okay, and they've built some really significant defensive lines. Okay, to where what they've done is they basically created a jagged tooth line where each part of the point to the jagged line, just like a zigzag pattern, all along the border. And in that zigzag pattern, the zigzags, at each point of the zigzag, you have pieces. Okay, you have concrete emplacements. You have weapons emplacements, and then behind that you have another line, and then behind that you have a third line. They're creating the defense in depth of concept. Meanwhile, they're slowly drawing troops from the front, trying to convince the British that they're still there, right? While they draw troops back to that defensive line. Because what they're going to do now, finally, is they're going to start throwing. This is what turns this offensive, this Austro-German spring offensive, from just a small little front to a major breakout. Because they start transferring those troops over to here. They start transferring divisions from the west and start putting them in the east. The British discover this, all right, a little bit later. We'll be talking about it right here.
Yeah, no, the redeployment is rather aptly timed as well, isn't it?
It is, but it's the adroitness of the Germans in how they produce it that actually is quite amazing. Because the British didn't realize it. The French don't realize it. They don't even have a hint that this is what the Germans are doing until it's already happened. And then it's like the Germans just up and walked away. And they're like, where'd the Germans go? It is a total shock to the British.
That's actually pretty crazy. That's almost like Lee splitting the army in half during the Sharpsburg campaign, right?
Yeah, pretty close, yes. It was a dangerous maneuver because if the British would have realized that what they were doing and done a massed attack, all right, at that time, early on, they basically could have smashed right to the Germans while they were withdrawing, and it could have turned into a rout. Now, the Germans were doing things to prevent that from happening, but it's still, I mean, the way they did it takes the Allies by surprise.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive, actually. Just like the Sharpsburg campaign, like that was Lee's greatest moment. Was
Chancellorsville. It's not Sharpsville campaign. Sharpsville is Antietam.
True. Antietam was more of a stalemate. You're right.
So, on you have the ending of Ypres. All right, then you have the Gorlitz-Tano battle ends, which is basically that's this part of the front right here, and then they're going to continue the push. The second battle of the Dardanelles, right? They are beginning to try and push the Dardanelles from the fleet. It's not successful.
Yeah, no, and here's the thing: the second push, that's what brings Churchill into the line of fire politically, right?
Oh yes, he is now going to be the one on the hot seat for what happens.
Well, no, and how does the Queen put it? Doesn't she just say, "I no longer am in need of your services, sir"? Right?
Well,
it's really
it's not the Queen in this case because you got to remember he's the first Sea Lord. All right, and he does get fired, but not quite yet.
But was it pretty much the cold shoulder like that? Like,
oh yeah, they blame him completely for this. They hold him completely accountable and in contempt for it. Yeah. Not just the Queen, but all the entire political structure.
Yeah, no, that was probably Churchill's biggest failure, right, in his entire life.
Well, I mean, you can look at it that way. I mean, I've never talked to the man, so I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be the low point. It's the low point in his career, except for his firing after World War II. Quite frankly, that was more disgraceful than this, as far as I'm concerned. This, they had a reason to fire him. Okay, granted, they're placing blame on him to a large extent that he doesn't deserve. But when you're in charge, you accept the blame. That's when you're in charge of something like this. Even if you weren't the one who caused it, you're still responsible. So you're held accountable. So in that regard, yeah, I mean, is he shouldering more blame than he probably deserves? A bit, but at the same time, he is the one that's in charge, so therefore he's going to get the blame. That's just the way the world works. You know, I don't think that Churchill ever really. I'm sure he wasn't happy with the fact that he was let go, but at the same time, he has to understand. Look, this was your baby. You put yourself politically out there. He knew the risks, and it came up, snake eyes.
Yeah, no. Okay. And looking at the 7th of May, the Germans actually take the Baltic provinces.
Yes.
So
that's all
Germans
part of this.
The Germans are doing pretty good at this point, right?
The German offensive, which began down here, now they're starting to push all along the front. They're starting to push the Germans or the Russians back completely out. They take Warsaw. They take all these areas. This is all going to turn into one large rolling offensive that goes from May 1st all the way through the 30th of September. And you can see they're winning these battles. They are stopping where they stop. They pound the Russians back into paste, and then they move on. And the Russians, for all intensive purposes, are in retreat the entire time.
Yeah, no. And when it comes to Warsaw, what's Warsaw have at this point in history? 1 or 2 million people? It's pretty big, right?
It's fairly large for Poland, but I don't think it has 1 million people in it. I think you're dealing with something that's around. It's still a fairly large city. 500,000 people is still pretty large, but it is the major the major Polish city. It always has been.
Yeah, so I mean that is an issue when it comes to the Allies, right?
Well, when you say allies, who are you referring to?
Russia, Germany.
Okay, that's the Entente.
France,
remember, these are the Entente. Yeah. Actually, considered the alliance is the Germans, the Germans, the Ottoman Turks, and the Austro-Hungarians.
Oh, you're right. I have it backwards. I'm in World War II mode, aren't I?
Yeah, it does make it a little bit difficult to remember, which one it is because of that. But yeah, no, the Russians are losing a lot of ground with this, and the Warsaw at this point is kind of like a political chip. You got to remember the Germans are fairly adroit at saying, okay, if you're part of the German hegemony, you'll be protected. And to a large extent, the Germans probably would have treated them and more or less did treat them better than the Russians or the Austro-Hungarians. But that's once again, how much is that saying a whole lot? Well, not really. It is war. Well, these people are being, they are traveling through. This is, you got to remember, during this time frame that starts in May and ends in September, that's growing season for food. And how much of that food got trampled underfoot by the armies?
Well, yeah. And what I'm thinking here also is, okay, as the Germans advance in the Russian territory, the Tsar, you're right, he's going to take control of the armed forces himself, which is a very big risk, and it turns out poorly for him. But at the same time, you also have Rasputin throwing his tendrils into the mix, right?
Well, at this point in time, Rasputin is a advisor to the queen of the Tsarina, all right? And he is able to, when their son has certain problems because he's a hemophiliac, all right, some of the things that happen to him, it seems as if he had enough medical knowledge to alleviate some of the worst aspects of that. So the Tsarina is relying upon Rasputin to a huge extent, but Rasputin himself is not. He portrays himself as a holy man, but he's far from a holy man. All right, I mean, he is doing things in court that, of course, the Tsarina won't. The rumors about what he was doing in court and stuff, because he's the savior of their son in her mind. All right, I mean, he has undue influence over her to say, look, I'm not doing any of these things. It's all lies. It's just court intrigue and everything. And she believes him. She trusts him because he's the one preventing her son from dying. Okay, so she's totally believing this. Meanwhile, Nicholas isn't able to pay attention to the family or even the court, really, because he's worried about the war. He's trying to win the war. He's got so many other things going on. He's totally distracted. He's not even paying attention to the court intrigue that's going on back in his palace, for all palace type intrigue. His total focus is winning this war and how he can do this, right? So he's worried about the logistics. He's worried about all these, the wide-sprung areas. Reports are coming in from all over the place. All right, and he isn't the person, really, all right, to understand what he needs to do everywhere. But at the same time, all the decisions are being given up to him, and he's the one who's going to have to make all these decisions. All right, so this is all part of a learning curve, and it puts a stop to a lot of. Unfortunately, World War I put a stop to a lot of the planned social changes that he had planned, okay? Because he understood you can't have serfs anymore. But how do you break the power of the nobility to allow for that? So all these things were being put in place, okay, when World War I happens. Now, granted, he could have backed down. The one mistake that he makes at the beginning of this that could have saved everybody, and I mean everybody, was look, the Serbs are on their own. There was no reason he really had to back the Serbs. Granted, would it be the Serbs were the Serbs being mistreated? Yeah, they were. Was it unfair what the Austro-Hungarians were doing? Yeah, it was. But at the same time, did you need to stick your nose in it? No. The Russians definitely didn't need to stick their nose.
Well, no, and here's the thing: when it comes to Rasputin, we will end up concluding the story that is, well, his downfall, but we're not there yet. So
no. But you're right, and I forgot to add to this. But what Rasputin is doing in court is, my God, the guy is just scum. All right, he is the kind of debaucheries that you read, that you hear about. All right, from the Roman emperors. Supposedly, Rasputin was partaking in all of that.
Yeah, from what I hear, actually, he was. Well, for one, he was sleeping around with half the court, right?
Yeah.
He perused with women of low status, which would include actresses and prostitutes.
Prostitutes, mainly actresses as well, but prostitutes was the big thing.
Yeah, and when they do actually end up killing Rasputin, the story goes they throw him in the river and he swims 3 times, right? Like, he's still fucking alive. And they unloaded their fucking gun on this dude.
Well, they shot him, they poisoned him, they did everything, and then they threw him in the river.
Yeah, and he was still fucking alive.
I mean, he was obviously a tough man, but and that creates a different dynamic, all right, within the court. That's the final. It's basically part of the final play, though, to be honest. But he himself he's a very, very nefarious character in all of history.
When it comes to Rasputin, would you say he was of the peasantry? Because there are two different stories. One, he was of low birth. The other, he was a noble. Which one do you think it is?
I personally think low birth. Let's here's some pictures of this guy. This guy's right here. They do have many pictures of Rasputin. He is as far as I know, he's a peasant. Okay. Who takes advantage of things. Now he was educated, and he did have, training from the clergy, but you can see he wasn't a very kempt man. Okay, he didn't keep himself. There's a reason they called him the Mad Monk, right? It wasn't just the eyes that they talked about, right? That everyone mentions his eyes, right? But the fact is that he was scraggly, all right. He didn't keep himself, washed and clean like the rest of the nobility. The rest of the nobility really despised Rasputin. They really, really did.
Didn't it go around the court that he smelled, right? Like he didn't shower.
Right. Exactly. He for the most part, I mean, that's one of the things that everyone, nobody liked him, all right, except for the Tsarina, and they would have gotten rid of him a long time ago. But the Tsarina wouldn't get rid of him because he could stop his son's bleeding, right, at beginning hemophilia.
Was he sleeping with the Tsar's wife?
I think that an accusation has been made, but I'll be honest with you, from everything that I've read, I don't believe that he was. I'm not saying it's impossible, because it's definitely possible, but there's no way of truly taking that down or narrowing that down any further than that.
That's a fair point. I've heard that rumor, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. But yeah, let's continue down the timeline here, because actually we're at about 42 minutes, and we're not even halfway through the month. So,
yeah, the next thing is absolutely huge. The Lusitania is sunk by a German submarine.
Yeah. Okay. Let's poke that hornet's nest. The USS Lusitania is sunk. The United States goes in uproar, right?
Well, first of all, you're right in that the United States does go into an uproar. There's no doubt about that. The reason is because the Lusitania is considered a passenger liner. All right, and it's sunk by a German U-boat off the coast. A number of things happen as a result.
Don't we break off diplomatic relations immediately? I believe we.
It does. We do complain about it. We do take the Germans to task over it. Here's some pictures of this. This is, you can see that it's a huge. These are huge passenger liners. This is along the lines of the Titanic. Okay, that's the kind of boats that you're looking at with this thing, right? Thousands of people on there. Hundreds of Americans are on this ship when the Germans shoot it. Now, the British claimed, all right, and the Americans for some reason believe them, that the Lusitania was carrying just passengers. All right, it's just a passenger liner, and that there was absolutely no reason for the Germans to sink it. Right. Well, that's true in a way, but it's not true. To say that it was a passenger liner, that part's true. To say that there were a lot of passengers on it, including hundreds of Americans, yeah, that's true. To say that it wasn't carrying munitions and weapons is completely false. There were definite war supplies being transported by the Lusitania. And that was proven when they found the Lusitania under the water and actually investigated it, which has happened, I think, in 1980s, 1990s.
Yeah,
now,
no, you are right, but the thing is, though, Roosevelt was doing that behind everybody's back anyway.
that was
We were,
that
we,
that
it was,
wasn't Roosevelt. That was Wilson.
oh, it was Woodrow.
Woodrow Wilson is the president of the United States at this time.
You're right. Sorry, I thought it was Teddy. My bad.
Woodrow Wilson is the president of the United States. The reaction is up to the point of this. The Americans have for the most part, said we're just going to stay completely neutral in this. All right. Woodrow Wilson wants to support the British. The American people, a lot of the American people, actually, if they don't want to stay out of the war, there's a strong contingent that wants to join the side of the Germans. Now, I know a lot of people in the British, they don't understand this. I mean, they look at it as, oh, we've always been good friends. Not at this time. We've never been an ally of the British, okay, in any real war situation up to this point. You got to remember, the United States we've only fought wars against the British. And there's many people that still are upset about the British's involvement, limited though it was, in the Civil War. They don't like the attempts to rein in America's growing power either from a naval perspective. So,
well, you would have a proportion in the United States that would be Confederate sympathizers that would tolerate the British influence. But you do have a very valid point when it comes to the fact that, 1812 wasn't that long ago, right?
no, well, for their memories, no. But like I said, the British have been doing things that the Americans have been looking at for a long time from the world stage and haven't necessarily approved. And they don't look at Germany as really an enemy, because the Germans have, for all intents and purposes, the Germans have done nothing. They haven't gone into Latin America. They're not really messing around, all right, in the kind of expansionist kind of way that the other European powers had been, all right. And when it came to what was going on in Africa, quite frankly, nobody cared. Okay, so there's not the negative feeling about Germany, and of course, within the United States, there is a large contingent of German immigrants that have come to the United States, just like there's a large contingent of Irish that have come to the United States, and neither one of those groups, all right, had warm fuzzy feelings toward the British. Now, the one difference is America still had very much a sweet spot toward the French, and that was the counterbalance to that sentiment. So that's one of the reasons why everyone said, "Look, we'll just stay out of this." This almost brought the pressure to bring the United States in on the side of the Allies, because the Americans looked at it as, you sank a freaking passenger ship with all this loss of life from a submarine without any warning. And what's worse is the Germans at first denied it. The Germans at first said, it wasn't us. We didn't do this. It was not one of our U-boats that did it. It isn't until months later, all right, that the Germans admit, yeah, it was us. It was this U-boat that did it. So that at that point, people are look at that and said, okay, the duplicity of the German people as well. This almost brought us into conflict. And what it does do, though, is Wilson is able to get from the Kaiser a commitment, all right, that the Germans will not use unrestricted submarine warfare. So it ends submarine war, that kind of submarine warfare for a while.
Well, yeah, no, and I have crying behind me. Sorry.
Okay. All right, so you have the British foreign minister gives a conditional guarantee to the Serbian minister of eventual secession of Bosnia and Herzegovina with wide access to the Adriatic. In other words, he's promising that when the war is over to the Serbs, who won't exist soon, but are still fighting, all right, that at the end of the war, Serbia will have Bosnia-Herzegovina. They're already carving up the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Meanwhile, in the east, further to the east, Japan presents an ultimatum to China demanding territorial concessions. This begins the adventurism that's going to lead them into Manchuria. All right, this is what's going to go. And China, as you'll see later on, actually agrees to this because China is in no position to put a stop to it. This does, though, cause a lot of conflict with the Russians because the Russians are concerned about this, the growing power and the expansion of Japan. So it creates a dynamic there from a foreign policy perspective.
Well, real quick, Jacob says, Mad Dodge, you should tell MC that there was always a possibility that we were carrying supplies to the Allies that would be military related. When he says allies, I think he's making the same mistake I did a few minutes ago, and he's talking about the Entente. Yeah, we did cover that. I know you jumped in a little bit late, Jacob, but MC is aware of that.
Yeah, the thing is that we had promised them that we wouldn't do that on passenger ships. We had promised that the passenger ships would not be carrying, all right, war supplies. They would not be carrying arms and ammunition on any of the passenger ships. And of course, that was never going to be the case. You know.
But no, as we continue on, so the 10th of May, naval convention signed between Great Britain, France, and Italy. Okay, so Italy is now throwing their hat in all the way, right? Yes. They have now convinced Italy that basically Italy is now coming to terms with this. They're basically getting on board. Now you have on the 8th and the 9th, the two things to remember here is these battles begin. Now, here's the thing. The battle for Aubers Ridge is part of a large offensive by both the British and the French in an effort to throw back the Germans. But remember, the Germans have moved into defensive positions. This battle, the Battle of Aubers Ridge, is an absolute disaster because initially, well, look, we're winning this. Look at how this. We're making advances. All the people aren't there. The Germans aren't even there. Where are they at? And then they run into that pillbox defense that I was telling you about earlier, where you have defense in depth, and it just turns murderous. The British forces are absolutely decimated. 10,000 killed, all right, in this offensive from just the British alone, between 10,000 to 30,000. It's impossible. Think about that. They don't even know. They can't even confirm the numbers. They know it's at least 10,000, and it could be up to as high as 30,000 British soldiers died. Whole companies, whole battalions, whole regiments are being wiped out, totally destroyed. Okay. Now the British, as bad as the British is, the Second Battle of Troyes, or at Troyes, however you want to say it, I don't know, is just as bad. They estimate between 100,000 to 200,000 French casualties. From 100,000 to 200,000. The German losses were about 70,000. That is 1/3 of the entire Confederate Army when we're talking about the Army in Northern Virginia.
Yeah. You're talking about reducing it. If you're talking about from the French side, it's the entire army.
That is insane, dude. The number of casualties. That is insane.
Okay, we talked about the naval conventions between the Italians and so forth. All right, Chaldi is evacuated. This is, like I said, see April 30th. This is part of that. All right, these battles that are just absolutely devastating. And there is some small actions taking place, obviously, in the Africa campaign. All right. This shows you the HMS Goliath is sunk by a Turkish destroyer. This is part of that, try and push the Dardanelles with the ships again. That doesn't work. Then you have this. The Italian prime minister tenders his resignation. The prime minister was against declaring war against the Turks and the Austrian-Hungarians and the Germans. He didn't think that they were ready, but at the same time, he can't stop it. And then on the heels of that, the foreign minister also tenders his resignation, because both of them understand they don't want to take the Italian people to war. They know that they can't win this war, that they can't do anything with this. All right.
Then why do they make the move? Why do they mobilize?
Well, because they can't stop it. Their government collapses. That's what's happening here. You remember, these are parliamentary systems. The parliamentary system has fractured. All right, they can no longer lead. They resign. These people resign because they can no longer continue the government. The government falls.
Okay, no, that does make sense. Jacob in the chat says, Mad Dodge, makes sense. Who would be willing to suspect a civilian ship of carrying military equipment? A Trojan horse, except with bodies. He's not wrong.
Well, no, he's not wrong. I mean, but the Germans were well aware that the Lusitania was carrying weapons. The Germans, however, also had the German submarine fleet had been told not to sink these ships. When U-20 sinks the Lusitania, all right, the commander of the U-boat initially didn't realize it was a passenger ship. He thought it was just a freighter when he sank it, and it isn't until later that he realizes that as it's sinking and people are running for lifeboats and things like that, he realizes it's a passenger ship. But by then, the deed's done. Now, the interesting thing about the sinking of the Lusitania is the Lusitania sinks very quickly for a ship of its size, for a single torpedo. And the reason they think that it sinks so quickly and gets broken in half was due to when the torpedo hit, it didn't hit the munitions that it was carrying. All right. But it is one of the reasons why the Germans eventually say, well, yeah, we shot it, but look how fast it sank. It's because the munitions blew up in it. It was carrying munitions. But what it actually hit was the coal areas, and they think there was a coal dust explosion and that was created by the torpedo that did most of the damage. And that's why it sank so quickly. You have, once again, now.
Yeah. No, sorry about the dead air, guys. It took me a second to unmute.
All right. Now, several other things have happened here. Lord Fisher, the first Sea Lord, resigns. He tenders his resignation. Okay. You have the Battle of Galicia begins. This is another battle where the Austro-Hungarians now, with support from the Germans, right, in this lower region down here, really this area down here, try to retake the losses that they had from before, to include Przemysl, the fortress of Przemysl, right, back away from the Russians. And that offensive is moderately successful. All right. Once again, the Italian cabinet begins to reform itself. a Russian expeditionary force lands in Enzri. Basically, they're going to start trying to push through the Persian lands against the Turks, trying to continue the battle to the south. These aren't huge issues. Okay, nothing's really happening here. This, however, is the big thing. The Italian government orders, because of the new government, it's now run by the war hawks. They declare war on Austria.
Yeah, no, and as the Italians mobilize and they start to attack Austria-Hungary, they don't do much. Matter of fact, don't they get stuck in the Alps?
They do, and they attack at Capriato. We'll be talking about the battles of Capriato. They repeatedly strike at Capriato in an attempt to seize the mountain passes. One of the Germans that's actually defending that region later on is a general that will become famous in World War II named Rommel. He makes his bones through the Capriato campaign. They're never able to succeed. The Germans lose, or the Italians lose the flower of their people just trying to take Capriato. They send over 18 offensives in an attempt to take Capriato and fail. 18 different offensives. They just don't have the military capability. They just don't have the military, mobile, industrial power to actually go on the kind of war footing that you need to run these kind of modern wars. But they declare war.
No, and Sherardi, yeah, the hell with you too, woman. But anyway, the fact is, once again, though, they don't have the armor units either. So you're moving through the Alps on horseback at this point, right?
Well, you're for the most part, you're walking and you're moving through the Alps, and of course, you're fighting in mountainous territory. And,
yeah, it's quite ridiculous, really.
And of course, what you end up with is you end up with the rest of the alliance. All right, basically declaring war on Italy. All right, yeah, you declared war on Austria. Okay, well, the Germans declare war on you, and so do the Turks. And then you end up with everyone starts to read about the Armenian massacres because the Turks weren't happy with the defections by the Armenians, and so they decide to end this problem of theirs personally. All right, and massacre village after village. And they're just going in there and they're just killing everybody. They're just going from village to village, wiping everybody out. This is not, when they talk about a massacre, this is truly a massacre. Okay? They're not fighting any forces. They're just going from village to village as people are going about their daily lives, and they're killing everyone in the village because they're Armenians. Ypres finally ends the battles around Ypres. Then you have the HMS Triumph is sunk by submarine off the Dardanelles. You have a falling of a coalition government of the British. You see, the governments in these parliamentary systems are falling left and right. Right. You have the treaty that was signed between Japan and China, basically cede much of Manchuria, southern Manchuria, to the Japanese. There is a
okay. When that happens, between China and Japan, the Chinese are sucking one up at that point, right? Because they have had a very long and bloody history with Japan.
Well, they have a history with Japan, but it's not a long and bloody history with Japan per se. To be honest, their fights with Japan tend to be obviously where Kamikaze, where he was the Genghis Khan, or was it? He was either Genghis or Kublai Khan. One of the Khans attempted to, I think it was Kublai. Kublai Khan attempted to take Japan, right, to take that entire region, and failed, with the divine wind and the hurricane that sinks his ships, etc. But overall, Japan has been isolated. Japan hasn't really been fighting with the Chinese. Japan doesn't really get involved until after the Meiji Restoration, which is in 1868, and even then, its forays are more limited than anything else. However, it's become more emboldened over time, and as the Allies start shrinking toward war from the 1900s, the early 1900s on, Japan is increasing in regional power and strength and is flexing its might and muscles. And Japan at this point has realized, okay, we don't have any resources. We need resources. Well, where are the nearest resources? China. China at this point is fracturing. It's coming apart at the seams. You have warlords all over the place. So Japan is looking at this saying, well, this is an opportunity to take these resource-rich areas, all right, and then we can now utilize them. They can now feed Japan, all right. So since the Western powers are basically pulling out, we can now move in that power vacuum, and we can add this. This becomes an easy area. This becomes their quote unquote colonial empire. Just like the British have colonies all over the world, the French have colonies all over the world, the Germans have even gotten colonies all over the world. Well, Japan wants its colonies too, and its colonies will be China. So it basically is looking at China and Manchuria as a colonization chance. And in fact, they start sending civilians over there to quote unquote colonize. Right, to go in there and live there and be Japanese and make it Japanese. This is something that's going to take place over time. But it is their plan. Now the Russians, they have a border with China. They have a border with Manchuria. They're watching this going, well, we don't know if we really like this, but at the same time, they're engaged in a major battle with the Germans, so there's really not much they can do about it. Plus the fact in 1903, they have fought a battle with the Japanese fleet and were absolutely humiliated. The Russians were absolutely humiliated. So the Russians don't like this. China is basically being carved up with all these different warlords taking place. All right. And it can't really do much. Yes, there's technically a Chinese government, but in reality, it's just warlords all over the place.
Yeah, no, and as we move on, where are we at? Are we at the 25th or the 26th?
We're at the 26th.
Okay, so you have the British battle squadron concentrating and joining the Italian fleet. How much of a naval force is that?
From the Italians? It's not significant, really. I mean, the British fleet, what it does though is it gives the British, all right, a bit more firepower to continue the blockade, right, against the Entente, or I mean against the Alliance, right, the alliance against the Austro-Hungarians and the Turks, which they do have a few ships. All right, they have made a few forays and attempt to do things, but now with the Italians, they no longer have to worry about that. It also allows them, all right, to withdraw. And what you basically see is you have the British squadron joins the Italian fleet in the Adriatic. The HMS Majestic is sunk by submarine at the Dardanelles, right? And Churchill resigns as the first Lord of the Admiralty.
Yeah, and as we move on into the next day, you're looking at the HMS Majestic being sunk by another U-boat. Or no, it's not a U-boat. Sunk by a submarine in the Dardanelles.
Right. Now that is a Austro-Hungarian submarine. The only reason they don't call it a U-boat is because it was Austro-Hungarian.
Okay, fair enough. I thought it might be Turkish, but okay.
No, I think it might be a Turkish. I think it was Austro-Hungarian though.
So as the Majestic sinks, does that really affect the British Navy much? I mean, they have
the big thing is they're removing Winston Churchill. Okay, and the you basically the ending of Churchill begins the end for all intents and purposes of the Gallipoli campaign. All right. After that, the British Navy and so forth, they look at the Gallipoli campaign as, yeah, it's there. We'll just kind of let it sit there while we start to concentrate on other things. And you see Arthur Balfour, all right, he is now appointed to the First Lord of the Admiralty. You will see Balfour's name, all right, used because there's the Balfour Agreement, which we'll be talking about. All right, you see that the Italian forces are able to take Wallonia. All right, you see more like the Portuguese prime minister or president resigns. All right, and is reappointed. The British basically secure all the lakes. This is the Tanzanian lake. Now, what's the name of that show? The movie with Katharine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart. Oh,
Casablanca.
No. That's Humphrey Bogart, but that's not Katharine Hepburn. What is the name of that? I cannot think of the name of that show. It's the one where Humphrey Bogart actually got his Oscar for. Oh, I cannot think of the name of it. Anyway, basically, there are several films that were made about this time frame and about the lake battles that were taking place in Africa. This is an African lake in Tanzania, all right, and this is the British secure complete control of the lake. What was interesting is there was a race by the Germans and by the British to basically move battleships over land, well, not true battleships, but warships over land and dump in these lakes. And initially, the Germans were the first ones to win, but due to several actions, including some mining that takes place, the German ships are sunk, and the British are able to finally take to complete control of the Lake of Tanzania, Lake Nasia in Tanzania.
Yeah, no, and as we continue on here, we only have a couple of days left, and we're just hitting about an hour and a half. You want to cover the last couple of days? And
well, the last day is really the only thing of note. You see the second action of Qurna, right, in Mesopotamia. This is the British trying to go up the right. There's a second battle here that the Ottomans, in an attempt to try and turn this area to stop the British from going further up, fails dramatically, and the British continue their campaign. It's going to go up to about here and then fall back to Kut, and we'll talk about that later. Obviously, the airships are starting to try and bomb London. They're not doing a whole lot, right? And then the siege in the Cameroons begins, but overall, those are just minor actions in the grand scheme of things. And that's the month of May in 1915 for World War I.
I do want to cover before we go here. The sinking of the Lusitania is a very big deal. As that plays out, the political climate in America turns drastically against the Germans, right?
Yes. It becomes very pro-British. Now, at the same time, Wilson understands that the United States is woefully unprepared for any kind of war. Okay? Our standing army is less than 10,000 men. Okay, so if we're not in any shape, we're not ready to go to war, and Wilson knows this. The Navy could probably do something, but in reality, there's not much really going on from a naval perspective when you think about it. All right, there's some submarine stuff, but that's more or less fairly minor from the U.S.'s perspective. So if the U.S. was going to get involved, well, what were we going to do? We would have to start plussing up. We'd have to start sending troops over. We'd have to start training our troops. And quite frankly, our troops, we don't have any troops to train. We would have to train them up and get them over there. So Wilson understands this. And when the Germans say we will stop all unrestricted warfare, submarine warfare, he is mollified to the point of saying, okay, he's got an agreement that passenger liners won't be sunk. And for the most part, they weren't, all right, for a time. Okay, and basically Wilson has drawn a line in the sand that seems to be effective, saying as long as you don't do unrestricted warfare, we as the United States will remain a non-belligerent, will remain on the sidelines.
But as this plays out, we're going to see very clearly that the United States will not stay out of it. We will be dragged in. And the dragging in begins in May 1915.
Yes, everyone's remembering the Lusitania. No one has forgotten it. There are stories being printed all over the American papers constantly about the Lusitania. The media organs at the time, the big papers are writing about the atrocities by the Huns. People are learning also about the devastating effects of the chlorine gas and chemical warfare. All of this is coming out.
The public sentiment is turning drastically against Germany. It will take a while yet before the United States throws her hat in. But the thing is, they never thought we can mobilize that quickly. And they make the same mistake twice. Right?
I think that that's a misnomer. I really do. I don't think that the Germans always did fear American involvement. All right. They understood that the Americans would open a second front and have a massive stockpile of men. Okay. If for no other reason, the manpower that the United States could produce, all right, and send over to the European theater is significant. And quite frankly, yes, you have submarines, but the ability of the submarines to attack over any kind of large distance is quite limited at this time. You got to remember, you're dealing with diesel electrics at this point, and at the very beginning of their movement, they don't have the kind of range that you'll see in World War II. These submarines can't sail, for example, from the coast of Germany all the way to the coast of the United States without stopping somewhere for fuel. They will be able to do that later on, but they're not able to do that now, right? I mean, this is the beginning of submarine warfare. So they understand that if the United States gets involved in the war, they can slowly build up forces in France, in the southern part of France, and they can't stop them. Furthermore, I mean, from a standpoint of weapons production, the United States, they understand that the industrial capacity of the United States to produce weapons is massive. It's absolutely insane if they really start ramping it up. Now, the United States hasn't been doing that yet. They are to an extent, though. The supplies of the United States with regards to, the ability to create ammunition, to create gunpowder, smokeless gunpowder, explosive, things like that, is really untapped. But it's not like the Germans weren't unaware of that. Okay, they weren't able to do anything about it. But for the most part, the fact that the United States is not in the war, yeah, the Allies are not the Allies, but the Entente, the French and the English are being forced to purchase this from the United States. But that's the word. They're purchasing these supplies from the United States. If the United States would have joined early on, the United States would have been producing the shot and shell and would have been just delivering it. They wouldn't be on a purchase plan. It would be just basically being handed over to them. All right. And the Germans are quite well aware of this. They do not want the extra manpower that the United States can provide in the war.
Yeah, no. And at that point, the unrestricted submarine warfare is a big fucking mistake. right? I mean, there's no other way about it. They fucked up.
Well, when we get later on in the war, yeah, but at the same time, it's a desperation move. It's something that they're desperate to do because they have to. They don't do it because they want to. It's because they have no other choice. They're not going to win a war of attrition with the British. That's what they learn. They're not going to.
Why is that? Like, this has been a burning question in my mind, actually. Why is it that the Greater Reich, right, Germany, they can't take out this itty bitty island? Why?
How are they going to land on it?
Across the English Channel.
Yeah, there's something called the British Fleet. You know, that's kind of like waiting for them. It's one thing you got to remember something, Mad Dodge, when you talk about warfare like this. It's one thing to land. It's one thing to do a landing. It's an entire different operation to supply that landing and to continue those supplies, to continue to feed men and material, all right, and logistics, food, ammunition, all right, all this across that. Logistics are the biggest issue. So, yeah, okay, could the Germans have forced a landing somewhere and for temporarily? Yeah, they could have forced a landing temporarily. And then what would have happened? Those men that were on that island would have been cut off, all right, eventually by the might of the British fleet, and then they would have died on the vine. So you would have thrown away how many thousands of men and all the material to just land on that island, all right, and then basically let them die.
Oh well, first off, I would land them probably either Wales or somewhere in the middle of the island, right? And
they have teleporters now that they can teleport to the middle of the island.
No, you're gonna cross the channel and you're gonna invade and make a beach landing in about the middle of the island, and you're gonna take as much territory as fast as you possibly can. You're gonna use the Blitzkrieg method in 1950.
And how are they going to do that? They don't have mobile forces. You don't have forces arrayed with tanks and armored vehicles. There is no blitzkrieg. You have no air support, okay? And the British Navy, all right, is the #1 navy in the world. How are you going to do that?
Very carefully. Fair enough. You have a very good point. I can't really argue with you. Here's the thing. This is the start of America edging towards the war. Politically, on the home front for me and you. What does Woodrow Wilson do at this point? He starts to mobilize, right?
He does start to get try to convince Congress to start increasing funding for the Navy and for the Army to start building up the military. To be honest, what he asks for is it makes sense, but at the same time, the Congress is not in any kind of mood to actually acquiesce toward it, and so they give him some of what he wants, but not nearly what he needs, not nearly what's going to be necessary. All right, and he's playing something of a duplicitous game in that he's telling Congress, well, we just need to plus up. We need to do this, all right, but at the same time, he's saying, and he's telling the American people, I want to stay out of the war. I don't want the United States involved in this foreign war. There's no reason for us to get involved in this war. And he is successful when the Germans come back and give him a treaty that says we will take back unrestricted submarine warfare. We won't attack passenger ships, and we won't attack American flag carriers.
That is true. The Germans do acquiesce on that front, but once they withdraw that in about a year,
A little over a year and a half. You got to remember, in a year, for all of 1916, the bloodiness is going to continue. We're only in May of 1915. All right, the Western Front is going to have another all of the rest of 1915, all of 1916 in a stabilized front. Okay, of just bloody, torturous warfare with dying, death, and destruction on a constant basis. This is all going to take place, and the United States still hasn't entered the war. The dying, the meat grinder that these men are living through, the daily hell of the trench warfare where you're sitting in the trenches getting shelled, and every now and then there's raids back and forth across no man's land. The offensives of 1916 are going to be the bloodiest offenses ever. The Battle of the Somme, the Battle of Verdun are going to happen, that are just massive killing fields where the Germans literally kill hundreds of thousands of men, British and French soldiers, while the British and French, their territorial gains are basically meager against the defenses. The differences in the air campaigns are going to go back and forth. At this point in time, the Germans are going to seize control of the air in the Western theater for a period of time, all right, because of the interrupter gear that they perfect with the help of a Dutch scientist, all right, for their planes. So basically, they have the great advantage in the air war. Then the British they're basically gonna get it back by finding a German plane and re-engineering it, basically, reverse engineering it to find out how it was working, and then they basically create their own interrupter gear. And of course, then it's going to flow back the other way again. The air war is going to be technology. One side develops a new technology, the other side catches up, takes its own new technology, dominates, and so the air war is going to go back and forth and back and forth. Tactics in the air war are going to change, and we probably should bring in Falcon for when we talk about the tactics of the air war and so forth, and how that changes. You're really not going to see much of that on a day-to-day basis because it's hard to explain that.
Well, no, absolutely, and I like that idea. So, hey, Falcon, if you're still in the chat and you can hear us, we'll probably be hitting you up in the next week or two to try and get you on the show. MC, are you going to be doing another show tomorrow? The
Yes.
StreamYard app seems to work fairly well, so that's nice.
It is a nice format for having streams with other people. I do like using OBS though for doing my morning shows. So I'll probably be using OBS for my morning shows. I think it looks a little cleaner until StreamYards at least gives me a thumbnail to put in here rather than a white picture of an icon.
Yeah, no, that's something I didn't like. I even tried to throw a fucking thumbnail up and it wouldn't let me. I'm hoping they work that out, to be honest, because this is kind of plain. It doesn't look very good.
Yes, it is. It is very plain, to be honest. So I mean, it is what it is. But it does allow you to have a discussion, so it's okay. Rest in peace, Hangouts. Yes, you're okay.
Yeah, exactly. I really do kind of miss Hangouts at this point, which is sad to say.
Well, I'll be honest with you. This StreamYard thing, if it wasn't for just the small little things like not having the thumbnail, it's actually the design of it is very simple and it works very effectively. Now, I did screw up temporarily Jensen's computer, so I'm going to warn you right now. If you have more than one person, one extra person that you're having an interview with or a discussion with, and two different people want to share their screens at the same time, end one screen share before you try to put another one over the top of it, because it did cause an issue with Jensen's computer.
Okay, good to know. Thank you very much. You gonna be around next week, or are you going on a business trip again?
At the moment, I'll be around. So.
Okay, sounds good. So, We'll be going into June 1915 next week. I do have a final 6-page paper to write, but I'm hoping to be live tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We always appreciate it. Please hit that like button, subscribe, and, you want to throw $1 in the tip jar, you know where it is. Come on now. Don't be stingy. I'm looking at you, Yorkie. MC, like you said, you're going to be around tomorrow morning. What time? Tell the folks.
I do my stream at 6 p.m. Pacific, and it's just my morning stream.
So 6 a.m.
A.m. I'm sorry, I said p.m. didn't I? 6 a.m. Yes.
All right. Yeah.
Always 6 a.m. I'm sorry. Well, to be honest, 6 a.m. Seems to work the best for me at the moment, but I may be changing that to 5 a.m. Just because of.
I do not understand how you wake up that early, but good for you.
It is what it is.
And Yorkie, sorry, man, my bank is so fucked it's screaming daddy. Yeah, I didn't know you banked at the blonde bitch headquarters, but hey.
Ow. Come on.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good night, good luck. Don't go to France without a yellow vest. We are out of here. Peace. Oh, Terran Marine, you showed up right at the end.
Yeah.
Good night.